This video is going to take a look at the diagnosis list and talk a little bit about how that works. So we've already got sample patient Ethan Lazarus selected, and we're already in the chart subtab, which we could have pulled up from here. We can go to Diagnoses, or from this menu here we could go to Diagnoses. They both take us back to this same table. And the diagnosis table is a place for us to record the patient's diagnoses. When you pull it up, you can see the patient's diagnoses get divided into primary diagnoses on top and secondary diagnoses on the bottom. In general, the system defaults for primary diagnoses and has a set list of diagnoses that it'll look for and call primary, and those are the diagnoses that it will think are weight-related. And generally, it'll automatically classify anything else as a secondary diagnosis, although you can change that. Now, this list is very similar to the medication list in that a diagnosis can be active or not active, and it can be set to show on header or not show on header. So, for example, on this patient, we have a diagnosis of eczema that's an active diagnosis, but we don't necessarily want that to pop up on the header every time we see the patient. And that was true for the acne diagnosis here as well. The features on this screen work identically to the way the medication list worked. And remember, we added direct access to this table from the MD note area. So to remind you about that, if we go back into MD notes and we're adding a note, the primary diagnosis and secondary diagnosis box are automatically populated from the primary and secondary diagnosis list that we were just looking at. So you can see that these fields are the same as what you see in the medical history. So it's the same as what you see in your header. And it goes ahead and puts those in, so we've documented each time we've seen the patient what their diagnosis was. But if we want to add diagnosis, you have diagnosis 1, 2, and 3. So you can add up to 3 diagnoses automatically at the time that you're seeing the patient. Now, if you start typing a diagnosis like chronic allergic rhinitis, the system doesn't recognize that one, and it's just going to add it as a secondary diagnosis. But if you start typing a diagnosis such as hypertension, it's going to recognize that, and if you select that from a pop-up list, so if it gives you a pop-up list and you select it, then that will automatically classify it as a primary diagnosis or diabetes. So that's a quick and easy way for you to know which are the primary and secondary. Let's not save those. Instead, let's go back to our diagnosis list and add a diagnosis manually. So let's say the patient tells us we forgot to add a diagnosis, or they're there and we realize we didn't do something we wanted to. Let's say that patient Ethan Lazarus has polycystic ovarian syndrome. Actually that should probably be primary. Maybe we'll add that to our list. Diagnosis description, you can leave blank for now, or you can add a description for the diagnosis. Billing code, you can add the billing code for that if you would like, and it can track that for us. Order is where you'd like this to show up. So if you want it on the top of the list, you could select 1. Active, yes, and show on header, yes. And date of diagnosis is today's date, presumably. And now you see patient Ethan Lazarus has polycystic ovarian syndrome. If you look over here at our quick view, you can see PCOS has been added to the diagnosis list, and since we had ordered 10, it just came up at the bottom. These were ordered higher. Similar to the medication list, we have grid add and grid edit. These are useful if a patient's coming in with a problem sheet or a new list of diagnoses. Grid add would let you add all of those from one screen. So you can type in, here are 5 different diagnoses. You can add more with add blank row, primary versus secondary, and so on and so forth. We'll cancel out of there. Check mark would have entered it. Or grid edit, if you need to do a mass edit. Let's say all of these diagnoses are now resolved and you don't want to show them. You could turn off the show on header feature or something like that. And there you have it. That's a quick look at how the patient chart tracks diagnoses.